Hey, it's Roberto. I'm with Exponential-e, and today I'm joined by a really special guest, Glynn Davis. Glynn is a reporter, journalist, international,
don't forget the international.
Yeah, international beer judge, ghostwriter. You cover a load of platforms. So it's going to be a really exciting talk today, really covering the topics of the blurred lines between retail, hospitality and leisure, since those are all areas that you cover, Glynn. So let's get into it. Glynn, just before we do actually, if you can give us a bit of an introduction into yourself, your background, the platforms that you cover as well, that'd be a good starting point.
Yeah, the roles I do now, they are a bit of a mix of the experiences I got from the point of leaving school. I recently did a degree in computer science, and I used some of that computing knowledge in my current writing. I then went to the city, where I did about 8 or 10 years as a fund manager, where I gained sort of the fundamentals of the way businesses operate. I then ended up writing a book. When I became a journalist, I decided I'd had enough of the city. Thought I'd become a journalist, do something different. During that phase, I wrote a book about the dot-com boom and venture capital, then went to work at Retail Week, where I was latterly news editor, did some work for caterer and hotel keeper, as you referenced, then went freelance, and a few years after that I set up Retail Insider and Beer Insider. So all the things that I cover now is retail, leisure, hospitality, with a bit of technology as a backdrop, which is all the things that I ended up doing, I guess, individually post-school.
Perfect. And that's why I thought you'd be a perfect guest for today's show, because what we found is that the retail, hospitality and leisure markets are really converging. And obviously where you've covered all of these platforms or all of these areas, I'll be keen to hear about your experience and insight as to why you think that is, maybe, what it looked like before and where you think things are converging.
Yeah, I think from one of the things you could say now, post-COVID, multi-channel and digital has clearly had a massive impact on the retail sector. From when I'd written the book, if you like, in 99, 2000, where we would have called the first emergence of e-commerce, and retail at that point became very much of a multi-channel business. Digital was a big part of the mix, and leisure and hospitality, food and beverage, if you like, didn't really have any of that until COVID happened, and then all of a sudden, the leisure sector needed to start selling its product across multiple channels. They started, the aggregators came in for home delivery. When outlets were closed, there was mobile apps came in. So there's a whole cornucopia of stuff that the leisure sector and hospitality needed to do, which retail had been doing for quite a long time. That's one of the key blurrings. The other thing was retailers had for years recognized the store has been a more integral component of the business. When digital came in, there was this thing whereas the store was getting diminished, and all of a sudden there was realizing we need to do more with the store. And then your experiential, theatrical component came into retail, which leisure and hospitality has been doing for years. It's all about the experience. And retailers are now wanting more of an experiential thing. So there is a bit of a flip-flop quite a lot with these things. Because if we looked at loyalty, for instance, when Clubcard came out with Dunnhumby at Tesco, loyalty then suddenly became a big thing in retail, whereas leisure didn't really bother with anything like that. And arguably now we're at a stage where the leisure sector is starting to do quite a lot of interesting things with loyalty, just trying to bump up the level of frequency. They're all fighting for people to spend X amount of money in their outlets.
Yeah. And what kind of things are you seeing then in that?
Loyalty-wise?
Yeah, from the leisure space.
I mean, the one that had the biggest impact, I'd say, was Pret. Pret during, just slightly post-COVID, when it brought its unlimited coffee for £20 a month. Just incredible. I mean, it had to row back on it slightly, and it's now £5 a month for half-price coffee. But Leon did a similar thing.
Pubs were doing it, work from pub.
Yeah, Prezzo has just brought in a thing. I think theirs is Children Eat Free for loyalty members. So there's quite a lot of exciting things, I think, coming in on there. I think it's quite difficult to manage because you don't really want to give too much away. What you're actually wanting to do, you just want to increase frequency. So yeah, loyalty is definitely a big battleground for hospitality at the moment.
Right, okay. So in respect of retail, you talked about them bringing more experiential, I guess the extravagance back into the retail store, and the importance of the high street. That seems to be a talking point these days, whereas not that long ago, probably not long after COVID, it was talking about the retail, the high street being dead. So what's happened there?
I think, actually, interestingly, I think the people who are finding the high street quite exciting, and if we sort of shopping malls and what have you, are youngsters. Whereas when digital channels appeared, it was a bit of a novelty. And I think for younger generations now, the high street and shopping malls have become a bit of a novelty. So all of a sudden, that's been the channel they've used less. So there's a healthy position, if you like, because, if you're looking at youngsters as being the future of retail, the fact that they are finding physical retail more exciting than the digital experience is very positive.
Yeah. We saw that reinforced recently with the Works shutting down their online e-commerce.
I can't recall another retailer doing the same thing.
That's the opposite way of everyone else.
Which is an interesting one. Actually, another one in terms of where you're seeing the change in a physical store is the interest, especially in hospitality as well, is with things like kiosks. Kiosks came in with the view that it was going to almost semi-automate the process. Customers could go in, the youngsters didn't have to interact with staff. There's great ability for kiosks to upsell. You go in there and you'll order an individual item and it will say large option, supersize, and it can keep repeating. Do you want to size it up? Do you want to size it up? A person behind a counter cannot do that. It would be incredibly annoying for an individual to keep asking you, do you want to large that or one up, etc. But a kiosk can just keep throwing these prompts at you, and the average sale is higher from a kiosk. But on the counter to that is there's a little bit of a move slightly against it to more of a physical thing. Leon are taking out kiosks from its stores, and Itsu has also rolled back the kiosk exposure in its outlets, wanting to create more of a physical experiential component to their offer to set it against other organisations. If everybody's got a kiosk, they all look the same.
Yeah, but if the kiosk is proven as a better revenue generator, to go against that is tough for a business, especially in this day and age.
If you're wanting to find the unique point of difference, what is your brand? Your brand can't really be reflected through a kiosk. I think that brand is reflected through the people in the organisation, the customer-facing parties. I think they are your unique selling point.
That's true.
Really.
And I think that's one thing that we're seeing more from the hospitality space, that the guest experience is coming through into retail. And
I think that's another point of blurring, isn't it, really? Retail is taking some of those personal skills from hospitality.
Yeah. In fact, that's actually a really good thing, because I don't know about you, but I'll be in a certain mood and a certain occasion where I don't want to talk to anybody. I just want to get my goods and get out.
Yeah.
And then there'll be other occasions where I'm open. I want guidance. Yeah. I want somebody to take me on a bit of a journey and help me buy the thing that they've got. Sometimes, especially with higher value goods, you want that journey, right?
Well, because I found it interesting that we have had almost an obsession for the frictionless, seamless journey. And interestingly, when you go into an environment where you're spending more money, I think you want friction in the mix.
100%.
So if you go to a Michelin-star restaurant, if they just gave you a tablet and said, order the food, and a robot delivered the dish to your table, I think you feel you've been a little bit shortchanged
100%.
From a Michelin experience. If you were going in a quick service restaurant, McDonald's, Burger King, etc., then you're more than happy with that. That's sort of what you expect. So maximising the friction, I think, is an interesting element. And if we're seeing more people being brought into the physical space, not just at the high end, Starbucks is bringing more people back in. And the fact Itsu is another example of where they're taking kiosks out. You can't take kiosks out and not put people in. So they've decided they want more people in the mix, which arguably is increasing the friction. But friction is a good thing, not just a bad thing. And I think it's been perceived as being just a bit of a fly in the ointment of the customer experience in hospitality and in retail. And I think that is now been addressed as it's not a black and white thing. Frictionless is good. And a longer experience is bad. I think that's been now reassessed.
Yeah, and I think that's come into light with premiumization. I think that lane of providing a premium experience, luxury experiences, people really buy into that. And even with whatever the markets are saying, whatever the state is, there's still a lane for that category.
Well, the amount of people who will queue for a certain experience is an interesting one as well, isn't it? Where the queue has become part of the experience. And if there isn't a queue outside those places, then Padella is an interesting one in Borough Market. It's a little pasta restaurant, and they've opened a couple more, I think. And the queue was there from day one, and the queue has never disappeared. And if the queue does disappear, it did from a couple of other chains I know, they decided they were going to put more tables in, change the mix slightly, and COVID impacted it as well. When there wasn't a queue, the number of customers were reduced because they thought there was something wrong with the place. It had gone downhill when there was no queue. So they decided to slow things up and enforce the queue, and all of a sudden the customers came back when there was a queue.
Yeah, places like Dishoom used to do that. They wanted you in the queue.
Yeah.
COVID, like you mentioned before, that really changed it, and the introduction of bookings, QR codes, all of these sorts of things have just, I guess for a lot of people made things better. Obviously, that's one of those examples where they've not done that.
Yeah, the QR code was clearly universally adopted during COVID when you had to order from table, and the majority of places took it out post-COVID. It's still in a few. It works ideally if you're in, say, a pub garden, and say the sport's on, and you're at the far end of the garden, and you want to order some drinks, and you just do the QR code, and the drinks come.
Yeah.
I think that works in certain circumstances, but to think that everybody was going to adopt those types of interactions is clearly proven not to be the case.
Yeah, when I'm having afternoon tea at the Ritz, I don't want to...
Well, every week, is that?
I wish. But what you want...
But you would not want to be in there 5 minutes, would you?
Yeah.
I go...
experience.
I go for meal with my mother a couple of times a year, and we will invariably pay a good chunk of money, but because we want to be in there for 3 hours. It's not really that we want to be eating for 3 hours. We just want to be in that place for 3 hours. And you can only do that in certain restaurants. There's the places that are fine with you being in there for 3.5 hours, and they're going to charge you for it. And the other places where it's high volume will want you out in 45 minutes. Yeah. And you're going to pay accordingly for those experiences.
They'll be hovering around your table saying it's getting out time now.
Or the robot comes over to try and take your next order for your dessert.
Nice. So moving on, I think an update that you provide every year is around the Disruptors report, and this year's no different. So this year you've released the 2026 Disruptors report. Tell us a little bit about what you've captured in there.
Yeah, I think it's issue 4, and we try to identify it runs to 30 individuals, and we try to identify those people who've been, as the title suggests, disruptors and innovators. Often, I guess, we look to find the rising stars, and the 30 people we've had this year, similarly to previous years, 50% of them have been male and 50% of them have been female, which I think is interesting and is reflective of the fact quite a few of these innovations involve technology, but technology is just not a male domain. There's an equal parts male female in the mix, and I think it's quite healthy for the sector. In fact, retail's rather oddly seems to have been at the high level. I had far too many males running the show, but the report fully reflects that actually it's much more varied than that. And I think the strongest elements this year have been things like health and beauty, wellness, quite a lot of FMCG, CPG brands in there as well. And health and beauty in particular, I think, is found the recent capability to launch a brand using various digital channels and things like TikTok Shop and social commerce. You can launch these brands and you can sell direct to consumer. And also organisations like Boots and Superdrug have been very proactive at bringing small brands in. I think that has been a really healthy part of the mix.
They create like a bit of a marketplace for all sorts, right? And use their channel to promote.
Yeah, but the fact you've got Boots now has been almost, once these brands have been incubated under their own steam, direct to consumer, the fact that they've been embraced by large health and beauty companies on the high street is really healthy. And there's quite a few of those. The other interesting element of this year's report is, as well as some of the smaller brands, a few of the larger organisations like Kingfisher, Tesco, Pets at Home are in the mix this year, which shows that some of it is AI investment, but but it's a broad amount of investment by large organisations in being, I guess, disruptive, if they can be disruptive as large companies, but just general innovation. I think it's not just the startups who've got freedom to go in there and disrupt and innovate. Some of the large companies are committing decent resources to mixing things up in the market, and I say AI is definitely a bit of an accelerant for that, some of that innovation.
Yeah, and that's always a bit of a buzzword, has been for for the last few years. But
I resisted talking about it for about 15 minutes, but we're in there.
Yeah, all right, we've talked it.
Yeah,
we've broken the seal now. No, but on that, you mentioned about Pets at Home, Kingfisher. They're doing interesting things. What kind of interesting things or adoptions of AI have they put into place?
One of the obvious ones that I'd seen, Pets at Home have equipped, and they're not. I think actually M&S just announced a similar thing. They were issuing quite a lot of their employees on the shop floor with the capability, whether it's through headsets or other points of interaction, to be able to communicate to the customer, but have this feed coming into their ear or visually. AI instructions in terms of what's in stock, what upselling, cross-selling might be done. So they're able to tap into some of the data in the background in real time using AI capabilities.
Turn them into cyborgs.
Feed that. Yes.
Nice.
But yeah, that's taking data from the back end, feeding that right through to the shop floor customer experience.
But crucially, using the human to actually deliver the experience to the consumer.
Yeah. And again, if we said that might have been a person dealing with the person on the shop floor, might have been an element of friction. If that interaction has been enhanced, augmented, if you like, because I think often AI has now been said it's used to augment the experience rather than to replace it, to replace the human interaction. When those two work hand in hand, and I think we are through Pets at Home, and hopefully M&S is going to be doing a similar thing, then we'll start to see that augmented person-to-person interaction appear in more retailers on the shop floor. Yeah,
that'd be a game changer, because in these big warehouses, you can't really expect everybody to have live, up-to-date location information of where things are or the stock availability of things. You don't really want to interact with a board or a panel that you have to type into and figure that thing out. If you can just speak to a person and they can actually tell you the answers.
I think it's worth mentioning though that AI is only really of benefit if the underlying infrastructure, i.e. the data, is in a healthy form and is accessible. Whether that's surfacing on your website or your, I guess the website and those consumer-facing elements. If the data surfaced whereby the chatbots and the whatever's crawling over your website to get the data, that data's got to be in good condition. And if you're making decisions on your data and then feeding that through to your staff on the shop floor, it's got the plumbing, if you like, the underlying infrastructure has got to be in a decent condition. And I think that is going to be a challenge, because if we looked at e-commerce emerging in the late 90s, early 2000s, one of the big issues was just visibility of your data, visibility of your stock. And even I would suggest even now retailers find it difficult to know precisely where their stock is, and a single view of stock, single view of the customer. I think that still is a challenge 25 years down the line.
Why do you think that is?
The systems were built in silos, and the word has been bandied around for years. I think quite a lot of it is still in silos. It's AI. I think AI will be of most benefit when it runs across the whole of your business, rather than it being used within silos in the same way e-commerce and selling in a multi-channel sense became quite a siloed infrastructure was siloed and still persists, because actually a lot of these companies with legacy systems, it is difficult to have a wholesale change of your back-end systems, and nobody would say that's an easy task. And if retailers don't, I guess, get to grips with AI at this stage, then maybe the issues they've had with e-commerce and lack of visibility over those channels becomes magnified with AI.
Well, that's why I was impressed that you called out a few big name brands that, nationwide retailers, nationwide operations that, employ thousands of people, but they've been able to disrupt, innovate and make change and to do it at pace and scale, which is obviously, not normal for large organizations. Yeah. So it's good to see.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. The fact that they're reflected in that report, it does suggest that certain organisations are getting a grip of it. Although it clearly is hyped. There's absolutely no escaping the word, and I think it can just appear like something in a black box. AI can do absolutely everything for you, and I think probably for a lot of organisations, that is a challenge just to decide what are they going to do with this black box. Because I don't think anybody said it's necessarily a straightforward technology to get your head around for a lot of people who don't come from that backdrop.
A lot of people don't understand it, and I think I've seen a lot of people that have made advances to implement something just to say they're doing something, but maybe not perhaps actually achieved what they were trying to, or perhaps thrown a load of money away.
How many surveys have you seen where it's questioned what ROI organisations are getting from some of those early AI adoptions? What ROI are they getting? So there clearly are question marks over what it's going to deliver, but I think there's no doubt there will be absolute guaranteed upsides.
Yeah.
And I went to the Next results last week, and one of the interesting aspects from that meeting with Lord Simon Wolfson, the CEO, was that they've got X amount of growth. That's probably arguably the most successful UK retailer, non-food retailer, I'd say. And Simon Wolfson was saying that they, with AI, they expect to grow the business, but they do not expect to add to their number of employees in the business. AI will effectively mean they can keep the same number of employees, which is good for their economics and their efficiency as an organisation, but it's a tough one for entry-level jobs going into retail and arguably hospitality as well. So when organisations say they're not going to lose any jobs from AI, it's probably absolutely a correct statement, but it means there aren't going to be any coming into
no growth.
So that's a tough one for people on the early stages of their career in employment.
Well, this whole market, this whole segment, they've been pounded by government policy, changes to that, and obviously other burdens put upon them. So, looking where we're at, going into Q2 of or in a new financial year, Q2 of 26 and a new financial year, what do you reckon the state of the market is looking like?
Yeah, I mean, those tax, if you like, national insurance contributions has, for a period when that was first referenced in which I think was possibly the government's first budget, when they announced some of those changes, national minimum wage going up, national insurance contributions, the threshold been reduced, was an immediate, all the people I spoke to in retail and hospitality pretty much said that would completely stymie entry-level employment. And I think that has absolutely been the case. So it has been a case of utilising your employee base as strongly as you can, to try and get more efficiency, which was a driver for things like kiosks.
Yeah.
Really. That's why you thought, well, actually, if you've got an outlet, I think in the past, the key or the largest cost component would have been your property. So what you needed to do was sweat the property assets as much as you can, i.e. keep the place open, keep the lights on as long as possible. Now, employment costs have become the primary motivator for the primary cost. So now it's not about keeping the lights on as long as possible. It's how long do we need to employ people in the organisation? So you could be running like restaurants. Some restaurants I know now are literally doing 6 shifts a week. So if you've got 14 potential shifts, you've got lunch and dinner, and you're only doing 6 and 7, you can make as much money, the economics stack up as much for 6 sessions as it does for 14, just because your staff costs, you may as well run it on those occasions.
And they're focusing it to peak
concentrate
it.
Concentrate it rather than having places open all the time.
Yeah.
So we are definitely seeing some more of that. Places will not be open all the time. Pubs, same with pubs. Pubs would have typically opened 11 a.m. and they'd have closed at 11 p.m. Now, many don't open on a Monday. Certainly, even in central London, most don't open till noon. And you get slightly further out. I live North London. Quite a lot of pubs don't open till 4 p.m.
Wow. Late nights. Late nights are back.
Clearly, there are other components. It's people are not drinking as much. There's other things to spend your disposable income on. But staff costs clearly play an increasing part, as opposed to that would have been property, would have been your main cost.
Yeah, it's an interesting one about concentrating the peak trading times and days, shifts, depending on the market. But obviously that means that your critical trading periods are really narrow, right? And obviously you have to make the most of those opportunities when they're there. If you're only open Tuesday through to Sunday.
They are trying to change the day parts. Day parts would be the term that the hospitality sector uses. So whereas you would have had breakfast, lunch and dinner, potentially, now there's a much more bloom, like brunches. Brunches are a big deal. That fills the gap between breakfast and lunch, obviously. But if you open for brunch, it brings your lunch can be like Dishoom. Dishoom opens for breakfast, and it has been argued to me that actually Dishoom doesn't make any money over breakfast, but those places are sort of buzzing and humming ahead of lunch. Whereas if you start lunch at 12, probably things don't get going till 1. Whereas if you're open at 9, things are really kicking off by 11:30. So when you get into lunch, you're absolutely on full throttle, and you can absolutely maximise your lunch time.
Yeah.
So filling the gaps can actually make things a lot more efficient, even if they individually don't necessarily bring in lots of revenue.
It's those boozy brunches, though. They're getting you on that.
The bottomless brunch.
The bottomless brunch.
Yeah, it's not my cup of tea. Obviously, you're in there all the time, Roberto.
Not a bit of me. Not a bit of me. All right, no, but look, you obviously interview a load of key stakeholders across this market, CEOs, COOs, a bunch of significant figures. What do they have to say about what's going on in the market today?
I'd seen that if we took, like, say, this year, the people I've been out to see, retailers and hospitality, I think they've got the focus. They have to focus on what their key propositions are. And I went to see a guy called Martin Williams, who runs a business called Evolve Collection, which used to be Conran Restaurants and then D&D. Now runs that, and they've got a whole batch of individual restaurants in London, and they are focusing, like Bluebird is one of theirs. That's like a brand. So they've picked out some core propositions within the mix, and they are looking to open a number of those rather than opening all individual restaurants, which they'll all look individual as part of a collection, but they're focused on like Bluebird, and they've got a Chop House, which they're opening. They're opening a number of those. They've got a bars business in there, and they're going to open a number of those around the UK and overseas as well. I went to see the boss of a company called Bubala, although somebody was telling me maybe it's Bubbler, although I'm not convinced. I think it's Bubala. They've got 3 units.
Can we set the record straight on that one with the owner of the business?
Yeah, I was slightly embarrassed because his name's Mark Summers, and doing a really good job with the business. I went to see him, and I'm just backtracking as to whether I did refer to it as Babala or Bubbler. But I think whatever I called it, I didn't get corrected, so I'm going with Babala. But they're vegetarian. He's not vegetarian. The chefs aren't necessarily vegetarian, but it's got Middle Eastern bent to the food, and they've found that actually, your margins are significantly bigger on vegetarian food, and they lots of influencers come into it. Very creative. Your prep's less complicated. You can do it in big batches. It's easy to keep. So the financials of that one work really well. I went to see a coffee company. It was artisan coffee company. They've also got Curious as a coffee brand, and they just recently embarked on The Family. The guy, Edwin, has taken his family on a 22,000 kilometre trip from West London to Perth in Australia.
Wow. To
deliver a bag of coffee to, I think it's to his wife's mother.
That's a hell of a trip.
Yeah. And to experience, en route, they'll be experiencing the different coffee in different locations around the world. But he, interestingly, has built a business which is almost like, it's very vertically integrated. He's got the cafes, he's got a barista school, he's got a coffee roasters out in West London. So that's all in the mix of he's selling the coffee to individuals, selling coffee to other coffee chains, he's teaching baristas in other coffee chains, he's got his own chain. It's like a real vertically integrated organisation, and vertical integration comes in and out of fashion. It's quite capital intensive, but you do have a lot more control over your supply chain. So that we may well see more of that, where people actually get involved in some of the supply chain. Farms are the same. Honest Burger Company, working very closely with regenerative farms, very, very close to the source. And lots of restaurants are now getting closer to the source of the product. Starts at the high end, Michelin star chefs with their own small holdings, very seasonal produce, no air miles on it. Is at the top end, but so often these things filter down. So maybe we will see more
of what they've got and what they've got going on around them.
Yeah, the story, absolutely. Yeah, the story. Now, if you're going to be paying more money, and we talk about friction, the waiter comes over and he tells you where these things. For a lot of people, they don't find that particularly interesting. But the customers who go into these restaurants and are paying lots of money, I like to hear the story. Yeah, I personally like to hear the story.
Honest do a good job of that and selling you the local burger, whichever one that will be.
Yeah, I think it's really good.
Place.
Yeah, very individual. Shepherd Neame have just announced a promotion, and it's like the World Burger Passport, and I think it's 10 of their pubs have got a burger specific to that outlet, and you get your card stamped, and you get a T-shirt and whatever at the end of the process.
But each one
of those burgers is I'm just looking exactly where these locations are. Yeah, but I think it's they're scattered around. But those sorts of things, I think maybe it's almost a bit of a loyalty. Refer to loyalty again. The fact you've got a card and you're getting your card stamped 10 times, and then you'll get some freebies at the end of it. It's a loyalty. It's a loyalty mechanic. Yeah. At the end of the day.
So you reckon more in loyalty, more in verticalization, and doing
there's a possibility of it. I think things that do happen at the high end, the premium end, so often does filter through. So if it's happening increasingly at the high value part of the market, then some components of it will undoubtedly be adopted on a more mainstream basis.
All right, sounds good. And in terms of your outlook, obviously you keep a close eye across all these different markets. Do you see anything interesting upcoming?
It's tough. I think there's no doubt. It's definitely tough. When there's energy and resources now in the mix, then it's just another. It's as a byproduct of the war. We're talking. Actually, maybe not as a byproduct of the war. Maybe that's because that was the war. But the energy costs are clearly going to have an impact. So you're looking at energy and then employment costs. So it's definitely economically a tough one. But as my report highlighted, it doesn't necessarily. In fact, actually, it can be a prompt for disruption and innovation. That can be the fuel for it, rather than it stymieing innovation. Difficult, challenging times invariably do lead to the most innovative and creative periods.
Yeah, sounds good. So I think the outlook is it's good. I think there's lots of
despite all the difficulty and all the aggro out there. There will always be opportunities for creative types who run businesses, in a sensible manner. Actually, just on that's just prompted me to think about BrewDog, and if you fundraising and things, crowdfunding was one of the big components of the BrewDog mix. I think there are businesses which aren't run maybe as well as others. So I think during these times, if we look at the BrewDogs, that's hopefully we're not going to have too many BrewDogs, but we'll have more businesses which run more efficiently and more effectively and creatively in these difficult times.
Yeah, it's good to see. And upcoming, we've got a retail technology show. I think there'll be a load of showcasing going on, opportunities there to see, what technology innovation is going to bring to the market. And I think you've kind of touched on a few things that people are trying to do to augment and complement staff, their labour.
Because I liked, and I did reference this when the Retail Tech Show people talked to me a couple of years ago, and they said, what excites you most about what you would potentially see at the show? And I highlighted then, and I would still argue the case for them now, really, really old school technology was RFID and shelf edge labels. And I think all the big grocers are now putting shelf edge labels on. You've got the ability to track your inventory greater. You can change the prices just like that. And another thing that I'm interested in, which foundations for it are shelf edge labels, is dynamic pricing. Whereas I think dynamic pricing gets unfortunately, it gets
Gets a bad rep, that.
it gets a bad rep because it's often called surge pricing.
Yeah.
Whereas
Uber's got that one.
I think, because when Uber charged an arm and a leg to get a cab in Manhattan when it rained over one period, and I think they did call it surge pricing, didn't they, on the app?
Yeah.
Then now dynamic pricing has just got tarnished by this surge pricing name, and in most cases, dynamic pricing is a price going down, because often it's in the grocery sector. It would be wanting to get rid of perishable goods. Yeah, I think ground zero is croissants and bakery. You've got to put it out fresh in the morning, and by lunchtime or post-lunch, it's got to go. It has got to go.
I think there's apps out there that gather all of those places that have got those sorts of things on the go, and
Too Good To Go, I think, is just a great one, and Olio, Too Good To Go, I think is very, very good.
Yeah,
really good. Yeah,
good.
We are frequent users in North London of that.
Nice.
Although the downside is it's a lot of bakery goods. You've got to be prepared. A lot of bakery.
Nice. Good. Well, look, so it's been an interesting chat, and I think you've given us a really good insight around your view around the market. Obviously, you cover a load of platforms. You've got a load of insights to share. You interviewed people all day long, so it's really interesting to catch your insight around that too.
Yeah. No, thanks, Roberto.
So appreciate you joining.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.